Well, overnight, Scott Morrison signalled even closer allegiance to his new political best mate, Donald Trump, with a speech really echoing the United States president with a warning against globalism. This, of course, comes as the PM faces continued pressure to release the transcript of his phone call with the president, in which he was asked for Australia's help investigating Russian election interference. To discuss more, I'm joined by Deputy Opposition Leader Richard Marles and also Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton, who is with us from Washington this morning. Peter, to you first. Look, you're in Washington and no doubt President Trump, he would have loved the tones of anti-globalism here from our PM.
Tom, good to be with you. I've just got off a plane in Washington, so not across all the detail of what's happening in politics in Washington, which is probably a good thing, but look, I think the Prime Minister's been very open about the priorities for our government, serving our national interest, and we've got a very important relationship with the United States, with the Trump administration, and we want to continue to build on that. I think by being open and frank about the issues is the best way to deal with it, and in relation to the Prime Minister's speech, I think he spelled out in a common sense way something that most Australians would agree with.
Richard, what do you make of it all? I mean, are we basically nailing the colours to the mast a bit too clearly here with the United States? Because it was interesting to see that the PM also went out of his way then to basically try and smooth things over with China a little bit as well.
Well, certainly our most important relationship is with the United States, and the alliance with the US remains the cornerstone of our national security. But I worry about these sorts of comments. There are a whole lot of challenges that face the world today which require global solutions, climate change being one of them. And I think the sort of almost nationalistic talk that we hear at the moment in the speech last night, but also that we heard from the US President a few weeks ago, I actually think is not the right tone at this moment in time.
Well, Peter, something you very much would be across is the dominating story of this week in terms of that phone call from President Trump to Scott Morrison asking for his help with an investigation. Look, from your perspective, why can't the PM just release the transcript of that call and get everything clear here?
Well, Tom, obviously, if the Prime Minister gets a call from the President of the United States who says that his Attorney General is undertaking an investigation, could we cooperate? Well, of course we would, and I just don't think there's anything extraordinary in that. So we're not departing from practice. It's not the usual practice that the Prime Minister would put out a transcript of a conversation. So I know there's a lot of hype and a lot of over-egged enthusiasm by some on the other side, but I think the Prime Minister's done the right thing here, and we'll work with the United States. And as Richard points out, the United States is our most important ally, but we work very closely with China on a number of issues, as we've discussed on the show before.
But Tom, there is nothing normal about this. I mean, that's the point to be made here. We're talking about a leader-to-leader request. If there are investigations that our agencies are being asked to undertake by the FBI or some other agency in America, fair enough. And there's a whole lot of protocols that apply in terms of getting those investigations open. But if, in fact, what's going on here is the Prime Minister's asked, the President has asked for a favour from his mate, and all that Scott Morrison has said is, yeah, no worries, mate, we'll get straight onto it. I mean, we need to know that. And the only way we find that out is if we actually get a transcript of this conversation, and that's what we need to hear from today.
I feel like it probably won't be forthcoming, though. Look, let's move on, because it's also been a huge week in finance. The Reserve Bank cutting official interest rates to a record low of 0.75. Peter, considering the big four banks have pretty much ignored the government's call to pass all of this on in full, I mean, has the call failed?
Well, the banks, over many years, over successive governments have been difficult on many occasions in relation to not passing on the full rate cut from the RBA. They should pass it on, and the banks at the moment are trying to rebuild trust with the Australian public, and people that have mortgages want to be able, I think at the moment, to pay them down as quickly as possible. The bank should pass the cuts on. If the
government's going to make these calls, I mean, is it just a bit of grandstanding, effectively a toothless tiger, saying on behalf of people, put the interest rates down, but nothing comes of it?
Well, Tom, I think by the pressure that we apply, it does result in better outcomes than otherwise would have been the case, because I've no doubt that if the banks could get away with not passing any cut on, they would. And the fact that the Treasurer's out there, the Prime Minister's out there, putting pressure on the banks, I think it's a good thing. And I think not only for households but for small businesses now, we need to see action by the banks to reduce that cost of funding, because if that happens, people can invest more back into their businesses, they can employ more people, they can buy more products and services in our economy, and that's a good thing for the Australian economy.
Yeah, Tom, the government's applying no pressure here. I mean, this is the proverbial thrashing with a wet lettuce. I mean, they're doing absolutely nothing. And what we need to understand here is that the rate cut from the Reserve Bank is a crisis cut. This ultimately is a judgment by the Reserve Bank on where the economy's at. And all the while, we see this government doing nothing. Record low wage growth, low productivity, low growth. You know, for years now, people in my electorate and around the country are going to the supermarket, making really difficult decisions about what they can't buy with what they don't have, and all the while the government is just sitting idly by.
All right, now just quickly, gentlemen, both of you last week, AFL Grand Final, put the touch of death on GWS, cursed them. Who do you want to apply the curse to this week?
You're looking particularly smug at the moment, Tom.
It's been a good week, I'm not going to lie. Now, this week, of course, Raiders versus Roosters. Who's the tip, gents? Who are we going for?
Raiders.
I'm going Raiders.
There we go. So the Roosters are going to absolutely win this at a canter on the form these two men had last week.
Get your money. Get your money onto the Roosters, absolutely.
Gents, great to have you in here. Good luck in Washington to you, Peter. And Richard, thanks for your time.